What happens when the quiet girl at prom gets humiliated in front of the entire school, then turns around and leaves everyone speechless with a single move? What you're about to hear will make you rethink everything you assume about the students who stay silent, sit alone, and walk the halls unnoticed. This is the story of Ava Chun, and after what happened that night, no one at Ridgepoint High would ever look at her the same way again. The gym glittered under dimmed lights and paper lanterns, the air thick with perfume, sweat, and teenage anticipation. The prom theme was a night in Venice, but for Ava Chun, it felt more like a night to survive. At 17, she had mastered the art of disappearing, shoulders hunched, head down, always sitting at the back of the room. Her long chestnut hair often acted as a curtain between her and the world, her soft-spoken nature mistaken for weakness. She had moved to Ridgepoint just 7 months earlier when her family relocated from Seattle to a quiet suburb in Oregon. While her older brother Logan quickly found his footing with the track team and local youth group, Ava never really clicked. She kept to herself, stuck to her books, and drifted through the day like a shadow on autopilot. Tonight, her classmates barely registered her arrival. She'd come alone in a thrifted navy dress and flats, avoiding the crowd gathering near the center of the dance floor. She lingered along the bleachers instead, sipping sparkling water and clutching her corsage, a gift from her mom who insisted Ava would be glad she went. And Ava tried. She really did. But watching couples dance under disco lights and hearing peals of laughter from the popular kids circle only made her feel more invisible than ever. Near the DJ booth, Golden Girl Brooke Van Court twirled like she owned the night, flanked by her usual satellites, Chloe, the fashion drone, Devin, the class clown, and Troy, Brooke's on-again, off-again jock boyfriend. Brooke had been smirking at Ava since she stepped into the gym. It started with whispers, then escalated to mocking glances, and now Ava could feel the heat of their attention slowly zeroing in. She tried to leave once, but Brooke had accidentally blocked her path with a faux hug to someone else. Ava knew she was a target, but she didn't know how far they were willing to go. Then it happened. As Ava walked past the refreshment table, Chloe stepped aside and Troy, grinning with a red Solo cup in hand, tilted the punch bowl just as Ava passed. A cascade of sticky pink liquid exploded across her chest, staining her dress, soaking her shoes, and silencing the music with gasps from every corner of the gym. Ava stood frozen in place, punch dripping down her arms, heart pounding, but not from shame. Something in her snapped. And what she did next? No one, not even Brooke, could have seen it coming. In the stunned silence that followed, Ava slowly looked up, not with tears, but with terrifying calm. Her soaked dress clung to her frame, but she didn't flinch or flee. The crowd parted unconsciously as she walked. No, glided toward the gym exit, her eyes fixed ahead like someone who had just made a decision they'd been holding back for too long. Outside, under the pale glow of the parking lot lights, she stood completely still for a moment, breathing deep. Inside, students whispered, replayed the scene, laughed nervously, but no one dared follow her. What they didn't know, what no one at Ridgepoint had ever guessed, was that Ava had been something else entirely in her old life. Before the move, before the silence. In Seattle, she had spent 9 years training in a Shaolin martial arts academy under Master Day, competing nationally in kung fu tournaments, mastering forms, weapons, and sparring with the discipline and intensity most kids couldn't imagine. She was once called the Whisper of Steel by her instructors, calm, calculating, and devastating in motion. But after her father's sudden passing the year before, Ava had made a silent pact to step away from all of it. Her grief buried her passion. She packed her sashes, hung up her uniform, and moved with her mom and brother to Oregon, determined to start fresh as someone normal. No more competitions, no more bruises or applause. Just quiet. Just school. Just nothing. But silence has limits. And tonight, standing in the cool night air, soaked in punch and humiliated in front of hundreds of laughing faces, Ava realized something she hadn't let herself feel in months. She missed the part of her that never backed down. The part of her that didn't need anyone's permission to be powerful. She had tried erasing herself to survive, only to become invisible to people who didn't deserve to know her in the first place. As the music inside resumed and the laughter reignited, Ava turned, walked back into the gym, and headed straight for the stage. No one could have expected it. Not Brooke, still basking in her cruel prank. Not Troy, still laughing as he high-fived a friend. And not the DJ, who stared wide-eyed as Ava stepped up and grabbed the microphone from his stand with a steady hand. "You all laughed," Ava said, her voice echoing over the speakers. "You thought it was funny. But let me show you what funny really looks like." The crowd went silent again, but this time, it wasn't shock they felt. It was anticipation. Something was about to happen, and every person in that gym could feel it coming like thunder in the distance. Ava handed the mic back to the stunned DJ, stepped down from the platform, and walked to the center of the dance floor, where the polished wood still shimmered faintly from the spilled punch. Her wet dress swished at her ankles, but her posture was upright, calm, but alert, like the eye of a storm. Some students snickered, others whispered, but most just watched, unsure whether they were about to witness another breakdown or something entirely different. The air felt dense, charged. Ava paused, closing her eyes for half a second, and then she moved. It wasn't a dance. Not the rehearsed, social kind they were all used to seeing. It was fluid, sharp, precise. She dropped into a low stance, spun in a perfect arc, and struck the air with a palm so fast it made a pop that echoed off the gym walls. Then came a blur of motion. Kicks that sliced through the air with surgical precision, elbow strikes that landed inches from the floor, and a spinning scissor sweep that looked like it could take down a linebacker. Every motion was deliberate, effortless, stunning. Her body flowed from movement to movement like water. This was kung fu? Yes, but it was something else, too. It was release. It was poetry. The gym was silent except for the whoosh of her breath and the whisper of fabric. Phones were out now, but no one was laughing. They were mesmerized. Even the teachers at the back of the gym had gone still, unsure whether they were supposed to intervene or applaud. Ava leapt into a butterfly kick, spun in midair, and landed in a perfect crouch, one fist to the floor, one palm out, like a statue carved from fire and stillness. The silence that followed felt eternal. Then applause. One clap, then another. Then the entire gym erupted. But Ava didn't bask in it. She stood, nodded, and said into the mic, "That's who I am. Now you know." Then she turned and walked away from the center of the floor, not in shame, but in quiet victory. Brooke's face had lost all its smugness. Troy looked like he'd seen a ghost. Chloe actually lowered her phone. The queen bee's hold on the crowd had slipped, because in the span of 60 seconds, Ava had become something no insult could reach. Undeniable. She didn't just flip the script, she rewrote it entirely. And though the punch had tried to humiliate her, it only triggered the moment the entire school would remember for years, the night the quiet girl became a legend. By Monday morning, Ava Chun was no longer invisible. The girl who had once slipped through the halls unnoticed now moved through Ridgepoint High like a ripple through still water, silent, but impossible to ignore. The video of her martial arts display had already made its way across every group chat and Instagram story in school. Some captioned it, "Kung Fu Prom Queen." Others just added fire emojis and the word respect. But beyond the viral novelty, something more powerful was happening. The story behind the video was spreading too. Bits and pieces emerged about her training in Seattle, the trophy she never talked about, the reason she stopped. Students were whispering about how she didn't just perform, she took back control. And while Ava hadn't said another word since that night, she didn't need to. Her silence now carried weight, not weakness. Meanwhile, those who had humiliated her were feeling the tremors of their crumbling reputation. Brooke strutted into school Monday in her usual designer outfit, expecting to redirect the conversation, but it was like watching a former queen enter a room full of people who had stopped bowing. Students didn't sneer or attack. They simply looked past her, their focus drawn elsewhere. Even teachers seemed more alert, nodding at Ava in the halls, calling on her with more care. At lunch, she sat quietly with a book, as she always had, but now students approached her, not with pity or curiosity, but with quiet admiration. One sophomore asked if she taught classes. A senior from the wrestling team said, "That thing you did, that was real power." But Ava didn't gloat. She responded the same way she always had, with a small nod and a glance that suggested she was still listening more than speaking. Inside, though, she felt different. For the first time since her father's passing, she wasn't carrying her strength as a secret burden. She hadn't realized how much she'd missed the quiet confidence that came from knowing who she was and no longer needing to prove it. It wasn't about revenge or attention. It was about reclaiming a part of herself she had almost buried. Still, not everyone was celebrating. Brooke's carefully curated world was fraying. Chloe had started sitting with a different crowd. Troy had gone unusually quiet, his once smug energy subdued. And while Brooke tried to laugh off the attention Ava was getting, it was clear she was planning something. Because someone like Brooke Van Court didn't go down without trying to drag someone else with her. Ava could feel it coming. She'd seen it before, in tournaments, in rival studios, in the eyes of people who hated losing control. But she wasn't afraid. For the first time in months, Ava wasn't watching her back. She was watching what came next. The tension that had simmered under the surface for days finally boiled over that Friday afternoon. Brooke couldn't stand the silence any longer. The way the hallways no longer echoed with her laughter, how the glances that used to follow her now drifted past her. She needed to reclaim the crown. And for someone like her, that meant creating a scene, something unforgettable, something that would shove Ava back into the margins where she belonged. Rumors began to stir about a reveal planned for Prom's after-party, hosted at Devin's house. Brooke's closest ally still loyal enough to hand over his parents' lakeside mansion for the night. Ava hadn't planned to attend. She figured her moment had passed, and she preferred the calm of home to another arena of fake smiles and forced dances. But on the afternoon of the party, Emma Navarro, Ava's lab partner and one of the few students who had treated her like a person even before prom, showed up at her doorstep holding a garment bag and a USB drive. "You should see this," Emma said, her eyes serious. On the drive was a short video, secretly recorded on Chloe's phone and leaked to Emma by someone who'd grown tired of Brooke's schemes. In it, Brooke, Troy, and a few others huddled in Devin's living room, laughing over a plan to remind the freak who runs this school. The plan? A fake apology. Brooke would ask Ava to come outside for a heart-to-heart. Troy would film it. Someone would trip Ava into the pool. It would be hilarious. Ava stared at the paused frame of Brooke mid-laugh, feeling no anger. Just clarity. This wasn't about her anymore. It was about power, and how some people couldn't stand losing it. Emma, hesitant but hopeful, added, "You don't have to go. But if you do, go on your terms." Ava unzipped the garment bag. Inside was a sleek, midnight blue two-piece dress, elegant, minimal, and strangely fitting. Emma smiled. "My mom's. She used to perform contemporary ballet. I think it's meant for someone who moves." Ava didn't answer immediately, but something in her posture shifted. The decision was being made not with her words, but with her breath, her spine, her quiet resolve. That night, the after-party buzzed with anticipation. Not for Brooke, not even for the DJ's set, but for the possibility that Ava Chin might walk in. And when she did, it wasn't through the back gate or the kitchen like Brooke had assumed. She walked through the front door, chin lifted, movements poised, not seeking confrontation, but prepared for whatever might come. Brooke, drink in hand, froze mid-sentence. Troy stopped laughing. Chloe's smirk faltered. The plan was still in motion, but now, it felt like a script none of them were brave enough to finish. Because Ava's presence wasn't just unexpected, it was commanding, and everyone there could feel it. Something was about to shift again. But this time, Ava wouldn't be reacting. She would be choosing the outcome. The party pulsed with energy, music thudding against the windows, string lights glowing over the lawn, and clusters of students gathering in loose circles of laughter and speculation. But as soon as Ava entered, the atmosphere shifted. Conversation slowed. Eyes trailed her as she passed. There was no dramatic entrance, no speech. Just the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need a spotlight to be seen. She wasn't here to play defense. She was here because she'd already survived the worst and found power in it. Brooke, watching from across the pool, clenched her jaw. She hadn't expected Ava to show, let alone show up like this, composed, graceful, in a dress that shimmered like the night sky. "She thinks she can steal my night again?" Brooke hissed to Troy, whose laugh had lost its edge. "It's time." They moved into action. Brooke approached slowly, rehearsing her lines, sweet, apologetic, rehearsed down to every blink. "Ava, hey," she called out over the music, her tone sticky with false warmth. "Can we talk?" "Outside. Just for a sec." Around them, the music kept playing, But more students were starting to notice the movement, the strange choreography of popular kids suddenly acting too friendly. Emma, from her seat near the porch, tensed. She made eye contact with Ava, silently asking, "Are you okay?" Ava gave a slight nod. She walked with Brooke toward the edge of the patio where the pool shimmered beneath soft lights. The moment felt staged, because it was. From behind a hedge, Devin crouched with his phone, filming. Chloe lingered near the patio edge, ready to deliver the accidental shove. The scene was laid out like a trap. But what they didn't know, what none of them understood, was that Ava already knew. And she was ready. Brooke began her speech, all scripted guilt and performative concern. "I just wanted to say sorry," she said, stepping closer. "You didn't deserve what happened at prom. We all got caught up in the moment." Her voice dripped with artificial sincerity, but her eyes were scanning, checking that Devin had the shot, that Chloe was in position. "That was ugly of us," Brooke added, her lip trembling ever so slightly, as if she truly believed her own fiction. Ava let her speak. Let the whole show unfold. She even took a small step closer to the pool's edge, giving them exactly what they wanted, until she didn't. With one subtle pivot, Ava shifted her weight, turned her shoulders, and whispered, "You've got 2 seconds to decide what kind of person you really are." Brooke blinked, thrown off. "What?" But before she could reset, everything snapped into motion. Chloe lunged forward with the shove, but Ava moved like water. She sidestepped, guided Chloe's momentum with one arm, and with a graceful but firm redirect, sent Chloe toppling straight into the pool with a splash that froze the party mid-beat. Gasps erupted. Laughter from some. Silence from others. Devin, filming, let out a stunned, "Oh my God." Ava didn't gloat. She simply looked at Brooke and said, "You planned this. And you just showed everyone exactly who you are." Then she turned and walked back into the crowd, leaving the queen bees soaked, sputtering, and dethroned. The silence that followed Chloe's splash was brief, just long enough for the shock to settle in and the weight of what had happened to register across every stunned face at the party. Then came the shift. A few chuckles at first, then open laughter from groups scattered across the lawn. But it wasn't cruel. It wasn't the kind of laughter Brooke was used to inciting. This was the kind that came from watching justice unfold, spontaneous, electric, and unstoppable. Chloe flailed in the pool, shrieking about her soaked phone and fake lashes, while Devin dropped his own phone into his hoodie pocket, now uncertain whether to share the footage at all. Brooke's perfect posture crumpled under the glare of dozens of phones now pointed at her, documenting the unraveling of her social dominance in real time. She opened her mouth to fire back, but no words came. Because in that moment, it was clear Ava hadn't just turned the prank around. She had exposed the entire performance for what it was. Fake, desperate, mean. Emma was already moving toward Ava when a new presence stepped in. Malik Bennett, student council president and DJ for the night, walked over with a quiet confidence of his own. "Everything cool here?" he asked, glancing between Brooke and Ava. Ava nodded. "Yeah, all good now." Malik looked to Brooke, who was still frozen like a statue carved from pride and panic. Then he nodded slowly and turned back to the equipment. The music returned, but it was different now. The party had a new pulse. Ava didn't stay center stage. She blended back into the crowd. But this time, people parted for her, not because she was feared, but because she was respected. "That was wild," one junior whispered. "She didn't even raise her voice," another said. Emma reached her and whispered, "You okay?" Ava gave the smallest smile. "Better than okay." Around them, conversations shifted. The whispers weren't about Brooke's dress or Devin's playlist. They were about Ava, how she moved, how she stood her ground, how she made them all feel something they hadn't expected to feel that night. Inspired. But not everyone felt awe. Brooke was burning, not with embarrassment, but with the sinking knowledge that her control, the social grip she had so carefully cultivated since freshman year, was slipping. She had always counted on fear to maintain her throne. But now, students weren't afraid anymore. Ava had changed the rules. No shouting, no revenge posts. Just clarity, grace, control. That was far more dangerous to Brooke than anything else. She stared across the lawn at Ava, calm, poised, surrounded by people who actually wanted to be near her. And for the first time in her reign, Brooke didn't feel powerful. She felt irrelevant. Ava hadn't taken her place. She had created her own, and everyone could see it. By Monday morning, the video of Chloe falling into the pool had gone viral, not just within Ridgepoint High, but on a few local teen accounts that covered school drama across the district. But more than the spectacle, it was Ava's reaction, controlled, graceful, precise, that everyone was talking about. She didn't humiliate them, Emma said during lunch, scrolling through the comments under the now-famous clip. She just revealed them. The difference mattered. Ava had become a symbol, not of rebellion or vengeance, but of quiet strength. Students she had never spoken to before were stopping her in the hallways to say thank you. A boy from the AV club asked her to join a panel on leadership for a school assembly. A girl from the debate team admitted Ava's courage made her feel brave enough to try out for the school play. The ripple effect was everywhere. Even Malik, who ran the school's social committee, invited Ava to help plan an upcoming fundraiser dance. "We need someone who knows how to turn silence into impact," he said with a grin. Ava had never been so busy, and yet she didn't feel overwhelmed. For the first time in her life, the world wasn't demanding she fit into a mold. It was giving her space to expand. Meanwhile, Brooke was barely holding on to the remnants of her fractured social empire. She tried to spin the pool incident as a misunderstanding, claiming Ava overreacted and twisted everything. But the footage and the vibe told a different story. Even her loyal few, like Devin, were slowly drifting. People were done pretending. Teachers, too, began seeing Ava in a new light. In Mr. Galvez's English class, when he asked for volunteers to read original poetry aloud, Ava raised her hand, a first. Her voice was steady. Her words cut like soft thunder. When she finished, the room was silent, not in awkwardness but in reverence. She hadn't just stunned them with movement anymore. She was beginning to speak. And when she did, people listened. Emma and Ava began sitting together every day at lunch, often joined by students who never had a table to call their own. It wasn't a new clique. It was a gathering of voices once quieted, now encouraged. Jake from AP Bio, Miriam from Orchestra, even Troy, awkward and alone now, started showing up at Ava's table, not to reclaim popularity, but perhaps to find something more honest. Ava didn't reject him. She simply treated him like anyone else, fairly, respectfully, without agenda. That was Ava's power. She didn't need to conquer to lead. She didn't need to humiliate to shine. Her presence gave others permission to be more than the roles they'd been assigned. And while the video might fade, the shift it triggered wouldn't. Because Ava Chun had become something bigger than a moment. She had become a movement. 2 weeks after the afterparty, Ridgepoint High held its annual Spring Gala Showcase, an event usually dominated by the drama club and student council, filled with choreographed skits, monologues, and musical numbers. This year, however, the energy was different. The principal had announced that the final performance slot, typically reserved for the senior class act, would instead go to a student who had inspired the school through leadership, grace, and quiet courage. No one needed to guess who that meant. When Ava's name was called, the applause wasn't just loud, it was emotional. She stepped onto the stage in black wide-leg pants and a sleeveless top, her hair tied back in a clean braid. No glitter, no flash. The lights dimmed, and the room held its breath. The music began, not a popular song, but a sparse instrumental, just a piano and a soft percussive rhythm. Ava moved, and once again, like at prom, the air shifted. Her movements were rooted in martial arts, fluid but purposeful, hard angles blending into soft arcs, moments of stillness exploding into bursts of motion. But this time, she wasn't just reacting. She was telling a story. Through movement alone, she expressed a journey of isolation, of being laughed at, of refusing to stay small, and of reclaiming her identity without bitterness. Midway through, she dropped into a low stance, then slowly rose, her hands sweeping outward like wings breaking free from a cage. It was part martial form, part dance, part declaration. By the final note, the auditorium was standing. Students, teachers, even parents who didn't know her name before that night were on their feet. But Ava didn't bow. She simply stood there, breathing steadily, letting the moment belong not just to her, but to everyone who had ever felt like they didn't fit. Afterward, backstage, students lined up to speak to her, not just to congratulate, but to share. One girl admitted she'd been hiding her love for sculpting because her friends thought it was weird. A boy confessed he'd quit piano after being teased and wanted to start again. The showcase had become a spark for others to embrace what made them different, too. Malik offered her a permanent spot on the student leadership board. Mr. Galvez encouraged her to submit her poetry to a national contest. Even the guidance counselor pulled her aside and said, "If you ever want to start a self-expression club, I'll back it." But what mattered most to Ava wasn't the praise. It was the realization that her quiet strength had become a language others understood. The girl who once ate alone, afraid of being seen, had become a mirror, reflecting the courage others had long buried in themselves. And for the first time in her life, Ava didn't feel like she had to fight to be known. She just had to keep showing up as herself. By the time the final school bell rang on the last day of the semester, Ridgepoint High wasn't the same place it had been just a few short months ago. The girl everyone once ignored had shifted something fundamental, not just in how people saw her, but in how they saw themselves. Ava Chin stood by her locker, pulling down old notes and tucking away her textbooks. But around her, the energy buzzed differently. Students she barely knew waved, others nodded with quiet respect, and a few even asked her if she'd be teaching anything over the summer. She smiled softly, not because she needed the attention, but because she knew now that her presence, her real presence, mattered. It had always mattered. Emma strolled over with 2 bubble teas and handed one to her. "You changed this place," she said simply. Ava shook her head. "No," she replied. "I just stopped hiding." Emma smiled. "Same thing, really." Down the hall, the walls that once displayed trophies and photos of the same familiar faces now held a new mural, painted by a coalition of students from different social groups. It wasn't flashy. It was bold, powerful, and raw. A phoenix rising from ink and flame, surrounded by silhouettes dancing, kicking, leaping, writing, singing. And in the center, a figure in motion, in midair, clearly inspired by Ava's now legendary butterfly kick from prom night. The mural wasn't signed. No one needed credit. Everyone knew. Even Brooke, who had all but vanished from the school's social radar, had begun walking the halls differently, quieter, more thoughtful. She passed Ava one day and muttered, "I guess you won." But Ava only looked at her and replied, "There was nothing to win. We just stopped playing your game." And she kept walking. As the summer sun spilled through the glass doors, Ava stepped out with Emma and a few others, laughing at something small and silly, the kind of laugh that doesn't echo from a place of pain. The kind of laugh that comes when you no longer have to shrink to make others feel tall. In her hand, she held a letter, a formal invitation to perform at a regional arts and martial movement showcase for youth. But whether she said yes or no didn't define her now. What defined her was that she finally had the choice. The quiet girl who had once been humiliated under the disco lights now carried the kind of presence that didn't fade when the music stopped. She had reminded a school, and maybe even herself, that sometimes the most powerful voices aren't the loudest. They're the ones that move with intention, speak with meaning, and show up, again and again, without apology. Ava Chin didn't need revenge. She didn't need a crown. She just needed her space. And once she claimed it, she gave everyone else permission to do the same.